Stephanie from Culture Magazine, and we are here to find out about some great cheeses coming out of Wisconsin. Couple of quick notes for today's meeting. If you would like to ask a question or make any comments, and I'm hoping that you're all going to tell us stuff that you've paired with these cheeses today, so we welcome all that feedback. If you would like to do that, there is a Q&A button at the top. Please use that button. That is what we will be checking. We're saving the questions for the end of the show. There's going to be about 20 minutes or so of time for your questions to be answered. So, so don't feel like we're ignoring you. Apparently I'm frozen, but I'm just going to keep talking. We're going to keep track of all these questions and get to them at the end. If we don't get to your question, the makers, etc., here have said that they are willing to answer them offline. So with that, I'm going to introduce you to Molly Browne from the Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin. And she's going to take us through the introductions with all of the other makers.
Awesome. Thank you, Steph. And hey, everybody tuning in from around the country. This is super exciting. I wish I could see your faces, but I see your names, and that is meaningful to me as well. So thanks, everybody, for being here today. So I'm the education manager for the Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin. We are a nonprofit funded exclusively by the hardworking dairy families in our state to help assist in the marketing and promotion of Wisconsin dairy products. And here in Wisconsin, we're a little different than other dairy states because we actually turn 90% of our fluid milk produced in the state into cheese. So lucky for me and lucky for you guys, we have a really strong emphasis on the promotion and marketing of cheese in our organization. So today we've pulled together a panel of all-stars from around the cheese industry here in Wisconsin. Each of these companies are making a profound impact on the dairy farmers of our state in their own unique ways. So each panelist contributes some really incredible cheeses to the world, and our goal today is to peel back the curtain and just give you guys a little bit of a glimpse into how the cheese industry works around here. So I'm super excited that you get to hear their stories in their own words and to taste some of their amazing cheeses here today. So we have with us today, we have Paula and Terry Homan from Red Barn Farms. Red Barn Family Farms, they'll correct me if I got that one wrong, who have a super unique and awesome story and approach to cheese making here in the state, and some award-winning cheeses as well. We also have David Rogers, who's the affineur for LeClaire Family Farms / Saxon Creamery. So really working on some really delightful, elevated cave-aged cheeses here in the state, which is very exciting. And then of course the evil genius, Chris Gentine himself of Deer Creek, who has, if you guys have never had an opportunity to, have a beer with Chris Gentine at a food show or at CMI, highly encourage you guys to track him down someday because he's a great storyteller and has a lot of awesome stories from Wisconsin cheese world. So not only that, but he makes some really incredible cheeses or helps bring some very incredible cheeses to fruition here in the state. So he'll tell you a little bit about, how he gets his inspiration to create these awesome cheeses. And yeah, I'm just super excited to have these guys here today. So I'm going to turn this over to Paula and Terry to get us started. So just so you guys know what the format's going to be, each panelist will share a little bit of their story about their company, what inspires them, how they come to market with their cheeses. And then we will have an opportunity to taste their cheese at that time. So if you're like staring at this plate of cheese and you're feeling hungry, don't worry, soon you'll get to start eating some cheese, but we do ask that you kind of wait until we move through the panel to taste each individual cheese. And as Steph mentioned, we would love to hear your tasting notes. Feel free to type those into either the chat or the Q&A. I think in the chat, everybody can see what your tasting notes are, so it'd be fun to get a little conversation going about what you guys notice in the cheese and any unique pairings you've created today. So I'll be super inspired to hear that. I barely managed to have time to like slap this cheese on a plate and grab a knife. So I'll be cutting as I go. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Paula and Terry.
Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to meet with all of you today. I too wish that I could see your faces, but glad to be here nonetheless. I'm actually going to start today. Terry and I, my husband Terry and I founded Red Barn Family Farms in 2008, so a little over a dozen years ago. And I'm going to begin with a picture of one of our very first Red Barn farmers. So I hope, can you see that?
Yes.
That's actually Bob Nett.
And you could see his cows across the pasture in the background there.
Yeah, his Red Barn. The reason I'm starting with a picture of Bob is because Red Barn really started with a mission rather than with a cheese. And I think Bob's story is really relevant to the rest of what we're going to talk about today between the two of us. So Bob was a rotational grazer. He milked 35 cows. Beautiful farm, 365 rolling acres of pasture. About 6 months ago, Bob decided it was probably time to retire. He was getting older, his body was breaking down, and so he sold his cows. And of course, now his rolling acres of pasture are empty. And Bob told us that when he sold his cows, an area farmer, neighboring farmer asked him, "Bob, did you cry?" And Bob said, "Of course I cried." Mm-hmm. People stopped by to purchase my milking equipment, and I told him it wasn't for sale. Bob has a grandson who loved the cows, would love to take over that farm, but that grandson is 12 years old. Not quite old enough. And honestly, today, for a small family farm to be passed down to the next generation, or for a young person to enter the dairy industry, it's just really difficult if all there is the commodity dairy industry.
And that's exactly why we started Red Barn Family Farms over 10 years ago. I'm Terry, and not only do Paula and I run Red Barn together, but I'm also a veterinarian. A full-time veterinarian. I work entirely in the dairy industry, and my passion really is for the cows, for the animals in our industry. And not just the cows, but an old-fashioned term called animal husbandry. I love that word. Animal husbandry is about caring for the animal's needs. Certainly, we as the humans, we get our food, and as farmers, we earn our livelihood from the cows. But I love the term animal husbandry because it balances the cow's needs with our needs. And I think that really goes to the heart of what we are at Red Barn Family Farms. I've been in practice for over 25 years. I've seen all kinds of farms. And I think my life experience has taught me how important these small family farms and the ethic that they use as they care for their cows, how important that is to our industry. They excel at that word, animal husbandry. And I guess unfortunately to me, too often in our industry, those farms are labeled, quote, terminal dairies. In a sense, the future doesn't have a place for these small family farms that excel at animal husbandry. And that was the goal in starting Red Barn Family Farms, is that for these farms to continue to exist in the future, there has to be more than the commodity market, or they will continue to be terminal. So unfortunately, a brief explanation is in order of the commodity market. It can be a little bit boring, but I think it's really necessary to give the background of why a Red Barn model is, in our opinion, or our belief, really important to our industry. Because milk is a commodity, dairy farmers essentially have no direct influence on the price that they receive for the milk they sell, the product they sell. They essentially take what the market gives them. In this year alone, milk has dropped down in the $12 per hundredweight range. Milk is priced in 100-pound increments, and it's exceeded 24, all in the same year. And these dramatic price swings are devastating, especially to these small family farms. So these swings, the commodity market, it really becomes, over the long view, all about efficiency. Given that farms don't have a lot of influence on what they receive for their milk, what they can control is how much milk their farm or their cows produce and how cheaply they can make that milk. And while certainly efficiency can be good from some perspectives, I think from my perspective, as a veterinarian passionate about animal health and animal husbandry, too often this never-ending push for efficiency has consequences for the cows and the animals. And so we based our Red Barn view on that we should incentivize how well the farms care for their cows. We have measures of animal health, physical health. And so we built a pay scale, or Red Barn pay scale, that incentivizes not only the volume of milk they produce, of course, but also how well they care for their cows, how well they excel at animal husbandry. So so often in our industry, the mentality becomes get big or get out. And what we wanted was a pay scale that incentivizes excellence rather than just getting big. Our farms receive a steady pay price. Paula has a chart here of
Hold it up.
the blue up and down line is what the commodity market has done since we've begun Red Barn Family Farms in 2008. And you can see the red line is what we are attempting to do for our small family farms. We use this pay scale to reward and incentivize, as I mentioned, excellence in animal husbandry and animal health.
And that steady pay is right around $21 per 100 pounds of milk. So steady across the board, they always know that's what they're going to get for their milk. So we started with 2 small family farms in 2008. You got to see a picture of one of them, Bob Nett, the rotational grazer. The other farmer used organic practices. And so as we've grown over the years, we didn't make our farms bigger. We just added more small family farms. Our farms milk an average of just 55 cows. So that's tiny compared to today's standards. Our cows are all known and cared for by name, and they live longer lives than the industry average.
We have standards, we call them our Red Barn rules, hand selected for their, our farms are hand selected for their ability to meet those criteria. And we think a really important thing is that they're owned and operated by the family. In other words, the family that owns the farm does the majority of the work caring for the cows. We believe that that relationship with the animals is just fundamental for excellent animal husbandry. We measure things like physical health and locomotion scores, as well as milk cleanliness and milk quality. And we tie those to those measures to our Red Barn pay price, as I mentioned before. We believe strongly that a key to animal health is that we get animals off of concrete. And so our farms are, the animals get on pasture as much as the weather allows. I've run through all of these things and our rules, and they come from my perspective as a veterinarian. But we do more than just communicate our word. We have an annual audit every year by the American Humane Association to verify and validate what we say. And we're really proud that we received last year the American Humane Association's, we're the first company to get their pasture raised certification.
So then the way we operate as a company is we take milk from our hand-selected small family farms, and we work with 3 local cheese plants to handcraft that milk into cheese for us. We're really fortunate to be able to work with a few master cheesemakers at those plants. And then our job as a company is primarily to market that cheese and to find new outlets, new markets for those cheeses. Our very first cheese was actually an old world style cheddar, very traditional make, handcrafted in 13-pound wheels, wrapped in cloth, hand dipped in wax. And that particular cheese has gone on to win a number of awards at US and World Cheese Championships. In fact, the wall behind me is full of those awards. So we're pretty proud of that, our very first cheese.
So the cheese we are sampling today is called Cupola. Is this the time when we eat, or when do we eat?
You can talk about the cheese a little, and then they can eat. Just one more minute.
So the name Cupola comes from the structure on the rooftop of traditional barns, the structure that holds the weather vane. We like to think of it as the pinnacle of the Red Barn. We really took advantage of the resources in Wisconsin here to put this cheese together, starting with, of course, the milk produced on our Red Barn farms according to the Red Barn rules. And then we worked with the good people at the Wisconsin Center for Dairy Research to help us develop the recipe for cupola. We partnered with Door Artisan Cheese Company up in Egg Harbor, Wisconsin. Mike Brennenstuhl there is a master cheesemaker, and we're fortunate to partner with him and draw on his experience and expertise. And the result was cupola, which we are very proud to say won a gold last year at the ACS competition.
And now it's time to taste cupola. I'm going to very carefully hold up my plate of cupola.
Or bowl so that it doesn't spill.
Sorry, I know a bowl isn't the best, but we got to keep it on the.
You know, cheese plates were like so 2020. I think it's going to be all about the cheese bowl in 2021.
Seriously. So the recipe that was created for cupola resulted in a semi-hard cheese with a firm but supple texture. We aged cupola for a minimum of 9 months. And cupola has some characteristics of Gouda, as well as some characteristics of Parmesan. Some say it's a lot like a Purano, others say it's a bit like a Piave, perhaps. But the flavor is fruity and nutty, and we think that there are some notes of caramel and toasted pineapple in that cheese. If you're lucky, you'll catch a crystal or two, and that crystallization increases with age. Right around the holidays every year, we put out a small bit of 3-year aged cupola, and then you're going to get a lot of that crystallization in the cheese. If you've had cupola, and the people joining us today, I'd love to hear what you paired with cupola. We love it because it's just extremely versatile. It has some nice melting capabilities, so it's nice on a pasta or in a risotto. It's delicious paired with honey or a sweet pepper jelly. It's really good shaved over roasted vegetables like asparagus. We've seen chefs use it on sandwiches with Italian meats and pickled vegetables, and we've even seen it actually in dessert menu items. And one of the most memorable was a dessert item that involved warm donuts, raspberry sauce, and shaved cupola, and it was delicious. For drinks, we like cupola with an amber ale. It's also nice with a Chardonnay or a Riesling, but we like it with a port as well.
That sounds so good. I was just snacking on it, and I feel like I want to pair it with caramel corn. I feel like it has that like that salty like side of it that would just go so well with like a caramelly butterscotchy flavor profile, and just like a little bit more of that crunch to play up the crunch that's already in there would be super fun.
Thanks
Awesome.
for your time.
That was so delicious. All right. From here, we're going to hop over to David Rogers, tuning in from central Wisconsin at the LeClaire Family Farm, brand spanking new HQ. Hey, David.
Howdy. How's everybody doing today? I'm not really like the best person in the world to talk about LeClaire Farm. To that, you're going to have to talk to Larry and Clara. That's where the La and Claire come from. They founded the farm as a small family goat farm back in the late 70s. They picked it up sort of as a hobby farm. It had a couple of goats on it. And as anybody who tells you when you pick up a farm with a couple of goats on it, eventually you're going to have way more goats than you know what to do with. So they started producing a lot of milk, and the end result of that, of course, is that starting in around 2011, with their daughter and a lot of their family involved, they started creating Evelyn, which was the sort of flagship cheese for the LeClaire family creamery. And we have been making that ever since. It is one of our top cheeses, one of our favorites. And even in that first year, it won kind of best in show for the world cheese, which was fantastic. And has been consistent, kind of one of our top-notch cheeses ever since. I came to the LeClaire Creamery in 2017, but before that I had been working in retail for a long time. I started at Whole Foods Market, where I worked behind a cheese counter. And that's kind of like where they put me, and I learned basically everything I know about cheese there. I started with a knowledge of, I knew what a brie was and I knew what a cheddar was, and everything else was sort of a mystery. So I learned on the counter, and I learned by being a cheesemonger, and I learned by tasting. And I worked at Whole Foods for a good 10 or 15 years. Then I left and went to a company called Standard Market, where I created a cheese program and an in-house affinage program. And that's kind of where the Leclerc connection and I really kind of come in. I had had their cheeses before and I loved them. I started working with Katie on our cave-aged Shandoka, which was a new cheese for them at the time. Shandoka was a block mixed milk cheddar, so 70% cow's milk, 30% goat's milk, using their farmstead goat's milk, and milk that came from one of the dairy farms down the road from us. I took that cheese and changed the format a little bit and put it into a wheel, did a traditional bandage wrap, and did a small batch aging of that there in the Standard Market aging program. After a couple of years of that, we actually took second best in show at ACS with it. And last year, of course, we did take first place in class for the KVH Shandoka as well. It's sort of my baby, and that is my favorite cheese that we make. And the difference between the two is not just like a format difference. Like I said, there's a total process difference, and kind of what I've done since coming to work at Leclerc. When we won in 2015, the ability to ramp up just wasn't in the cards for a small in-house retailer affinage program. So when I was speaking to Larry, Clara, and Katie, we just thought, let's just move it in-house, and we kind of picked up sticks. And we took the whole program and brought it up to Pipe, Wisconsin, where we have our plant now, and started doing the aging in-house, and I came with it. So it means that much to me. I commute 2.5 hours to come to Wisconsin from Chicago to age this cheese. Just over the last couple of years, we also came into a bit of a business merger with a company called Mosaic Meadows, where we work with Saxon Creamery, and Lamagna Creamery over in Pennsylvania, where we took our ability to make high quality cheeses and their high quality cheeses to bring them in-house to help us reduce some of our costs of production. So instead of having 2 plants and 2 staffs making the cheeses that we make, we have all of that in one place. And I kind of inherited the affinage of the Saxon brand as well. So over the last couple of years, we have been kind of working that into our regular rotation and kind of figuring out how those cheeses come. And you should have gotten some of those for you to taste as well. I hope you enjoy those. I gave you some Snowfields and some Big Eds, which are our 2 kind of classic cheeses there. The Saxon is comes from a grass-fed farmstead, homestead rather, farm. And then they take that milk and then bring it here, and we still make their cheeses with it today. So they're pasture raised during the summer and the winter, and then they are because you can't eat grass in the winter in Wisconsin. So we move them into the barn and keep the cows warm, and they go onto a feed during the winter months. So we change up when we make cheeses and what kind of cheeses we make with the Saxon line in order to maximize the differences that we get out of the milks. The protein and fat structure changes throughout the year. So kind of keeping a really close eye on those flags in the milk tells us when it's time to start making Snowfields and stop making Saxony, for example, which are our 2 kind of like major seasonal cheeses. It also makes some pretty significant changes in how we work with the milk for things like our Big Eds, which is our flagship Gouda we make all year round. We actually do have to change how we make that cheese during the winter months because the proteins and the fats are so much different that if we didn't, it would have a lot more moisture and it would age completely different, and the flavor profile just kind of goes off a cliff. So we're very cognizant of keeping an eye on how that milk changes throughout the year so that we can adjust how we make the cheese to get it as consistent as we can. That being said, all of our cheeses and all of our milk comes from single herd, single farm kind of productions, regardless of the size of them. The goats herd is getting pretty big these days, I hear. I don't spend a lot of time with the goats, unfortunately. But the milk itself changes on a fairly regular basis, so that we do have a lot of variation from batch to batch. And part of what I do here is I do frequent tasting and early tasting to make sure that we're guiding the cheeses through the aging process to be as consistent as they possibly can when they get out to the market. Sometimes that means selling a batch earlier than a batch that came right after it, just because it's ready now. And if I wait, it's going to be not as good. And I've got a batch that's, you know, technically older, but it isn't quite ready yet. So it's kind of figuring out and prioritizing which batches are ready for release, which are not ready for release. I spend a lot of my time just tasting cheese. The rest of the time is like spent lifting wheels of cheese, turning them over, wiping them, and putting them back down on boards. That is my zen. I enjoy that. I love it. Not everybody does. I get it. But for me, just like the repetitive and yet attentive care for that cheese is just something I really, really like to do. Weeks where I don't get to do that are the weeks where I'm less happy. So if I haven't flipped a wheel of cheese this week, I'm a cranky boy. But overall, I think that is the general gist of how we like to run things and what I do here. We did give you 4 cheeses to taste, but we're going to taste today together through the 2 Shandokas, because I really kind of think that what's clear about affinage and kind of like focused attention on cheeses is these 2 cheeses. So essentially you should have a square like yay. This is the regular Shandoka. This is our made in a 40-pound block, traditional Wisconsin cheddar style. That being said, it is sort of like a New Zealand cheddar in the way that we make it. And then you should have gotten a black wrapped wedge. And this is our cave aged Shandoka. When you taste them, I would start with the regular and then move to the cave aged. The regular, you should get these nice kind of like lemony, buttery, a little sweet, a little salty kind of notes going on with it. It should have pretty solid acid development. It should have this really sort of like tropical fruit and macadamia nut kind of characteristic that I really dig. If it's optimal and if it's peak, it should kind of have all of those things going on it. The cave aged cheddar, on the other hand, is going to have that base flavor profile, but it's also going to be bandage wrapped and handled in a more traditional manner, which means that it gets that natural rind development of mold, and then that mold is eaten off by mites. Don't freak out. We take very careful care of our mites in order to make sure that what we do is we brush and vacuum those wheels every week, because if the mites move in, they will eat an entire wheel of cheese if you're not watching, and that they're hungry little buggers. So the difference though then is that the flavor gets a little saltier, it gets a little less sweet, and towards the rind you're going to get these sort of cellar flavors. It's really a bolder cheese, and it's got a lot more kind of depth going on with it. I love them both, but of course the cave aged is my baby, so I have a favorite. So that's the way it is. I guess that's kind of like the gist of what we've got with our cheeses there.
Awesome. Thank you, David. I really enjoyed that tasting experiment. I always love to, play around with different sensory profiles. And this, I think, is a great illustration of how cave aging can impact the characteristics of a cheese. I have to say, like, when I ate that cave aged cheese, it tasted just like kaffir lime leaves. Like, I was like, I feel like I am floating on a tropical vacation right now, like sipping some minty limey drink. It was very delicious. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, my pleasure.
All right, and I'm going to pass it over to Chris. Hey, Chris.
Hi, Molly. How you doing? Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for taking some time in your afternoon to join all of us. This is actually, I'm really honored to be on with this panel because they do a lot of great things. They have really created some cool cheeses, so it's good. And I think one of the things that we were talking about a little before we kind of put this piece together is how we all work together in the industry, and how we compete, but we kind of compete in a friendly manner, I guess, from this standpoint. And there's still a little bit of grace, I guess, which is a good way to say it, within the industry, that you try to all do the right things, because ultimately there's a whole bunch of families, and I think Terry and Paula really hit on it. There's a whole bunch of families that count on us doing the right thing. And, you know, we have to respect them too, because there's more than just us and our individual companies that are part of this, and it gets to be a lot bigger than that. So it's a really cool group for me to be on with. So, so Deer Creek, my wife and I started Deer Creek out of the Artisan Cheese Exchange, which is really the parent company, where we export U.S. artisan and specialty cheeses abroad. And we still do that for different makers throughout the United States, and a lot of them outside of Wisconsin as well. But Deer Creek really came in an attempt to get some cheeses that I liked. I'm not a cheese maker. I am a licensed cheese grater, so I'm a flavor guy. So I don't hang over the vat every day and do those things. I'm more, in the state of Wisconsin, we really created the grading corps as a really kind of an overreaching quality arm to enforce standards on cheeses, to make sure that they met the 38 standards of criteria, correctly labeled boxes all the way to body and texture characteristics to meet that standard of identity. Because as the industry exploded out of Wisconsin, you know, not everybody was making a cheddar that was maybe really a cheddar or Monjack or Swiss style. So there's 3 distinct licenses that you can go for, including Brick and Munster and Swiss, and cheddar and American styles, Colby and Monterey Jack. And I loved it because when I was a kid, there was a guy who worked for my grandfather named Al Oleg, who was my grandpa's grader. And I was working in the factory and in my whites at 14, and we worked really hard. We moved, you know, 30, 40,000 pounds of cheese through a production line in a day. And Al was always in the back in the receiving area, and he would stand there and he'd have his trier. And I had my, I used to carry my trier before 9/11 because you could fly with it. So Al had his trier in his pocket and his little bottles that he would put all the samples in. And I'd be sweating in the dead of summer because plants weren't overly air conditioned. And Al was there. He's always cool, and he wore a tie, and he was like, Al doesn't look like he's working too hard. I look like I'm killing him. I want to be a cheese grater, you know? So this kind of the inspiration of a young guy, not wanting to work quite as hard, but that didn't happen for me for a long time. So really apprenticed as a cheese grater, and then went through the commodity side of the business for 20 years. And then my wife and I started this company in 2006. So Deer Creek kind of came out of this export arm, and I know I'm meandering around a little bit. It's kind of what I do. But Deer Creek was really, is kind of more a state of mind than it is an actual place. But it's our belief in taking really cheeses that we've seen commoditized and aren't made in such a traditional manner anymore, and trying to bring them back to where they need to be. Because I think speed kills, and I really believe that we're really one generation away from not knowing some of these stalwart classics that have been around. You know, one of the ones we do in that vein is the Robin, which is a classic Colby done in a bandage wrap format, and that cheese has been very commoditized over the years and really has suffered in popularity. So we try to make one that's really the way we made it in the 40s and 50s in Wisconsin, and really traces its roots back to the 1848, I think, is when the first time that cheese was made. So, and then we do some things because I like to play with stuff, and I kind of have a lot of passion. I like the old hot rodders from the 60s. I'm a Hot Wheels kid. So I look at guys like Big Daddy Ed Roth and Von Dutch, the famous pinstriper, and guys like Carroll Shelby and Choppers and Channelers and Chip Foose and those kind of guys. And I like to try to do that with cheese because sometimes I think cheese has become a little bit too maybe set in its ways. So aside from being very traditional on one side, which is maybe the dichotomy in my mind, I like to get a little bit wild on the other side. So I started screwing around with cultures probably about a year after we started the company, and just really got intrigued by it because we would see different cultures being used to drive different flavors in different cheddar making regions around the world when we would travel. And I had the good fortune to meet up with guys like Jason Hines from Neal's Yard, and talk to them a lot, and Browne and Percival, and then had, you know, friends like Mateo Keller and Andy out at Sellers, and just talking to them about different things. Some friends of mine from Australia, New Zealand, and kind of what they were doing to try to jam some different flavors in their cheddars and the different cultures that maybe were part terroir and part cocktail. So what we did really was we worked with a culture house, which is, these guys are like the Merlin, the magicians of cheese making. They make really incredible things happen. And we really set forth to have a cocktail of cultures that was distinctive of primary or nuanced flavors that would either replicate the terroir level in different parts of the world, or would replicate what they were doing from a nuanced standpoint of trying to drive their flavors a little bit differently. When you look at the UK, a lot of guys make cheddar, but they're all a little bit different. And some of that's terroir, but some of it's not. So we really kind of took a model out of that and said, this would be kind of fun. And we started to play around with that. The initial cheese that came out of that was vat 17, where we actually made about 10 different vats with different cocktails, and then watched it to see what it would do. And it really was something special about that 17th vat, which is where the name vat 17 came from. When we were doing that, I was making that with a partner company in a much bigger facility. They produce a lot of cheese, and some of the cultures in there are a little aggressive. And they were like, we don't know, this might jazz up our regular cheese, so we don't think we want to make this anymore. So I went to my buddy, Carrie Henning, who's one of our master cheese makers. And I've known Carrie for, oh man, almost 30 years now. But it's cool because Carrie's dad and my dad did business together, and Carrie's grandpa and my grandpa did business together. So it's kind of going back 100, my grandpa started in 1953, started his company. So going back a pretty good, I guess it is a pretty long time now. I think it was 2020. It's kind of one of the other things we do in Wisconsin. There's a lot of multi-generational transactions that go between families. And sometimes I remember standing with my grandpa in Mr. Henning's plant, and him and his young son, Everett's probably 80, just knowing these guys for that long. So I called Carrie and I said, hey, would you make this cheese? And he said, sure. I'm not a real fan of that style cheese, but sure, I like you, I'll make it. So when we were making it, at that time, he didn't have a lot of extra line time and production ability. So we started making single vats. And then I said, hey, for fun, why don't we throw some into some traditional 22-pound bandage wrap daisies? And so we knew what this other cheese was going to be like because we'd been making it for several years. And so he started making this cheese, and we're probably 4 months down the road, and I said, don't make any more block. Don't make any more 40-pound block for vat 17. He goes, why, is the cheese bad? And I go, you got to taste these daisies. They're amazing. And David touched on it a little bit, but the cultures, when you go from making a 40-pound block in a very anaerobic state to where you now are doing a bandage wrapped wax daisy, the cheese ages out differently. And the cultures interact differently because you have this ability of the moisture to wick away through that bandage in the wax. And it really changes the cheese up. So we started off, the original cheese then became the fawn. And then we had wanted to age it out to kind of push it as you do with things. And I'm sure David's got some where he knows the mites eat it because he was trying to push some stuff. But we tried to push it out, and then that became the stag. So the cheese that we're going to try today, because I don't want to completely bore you to death. The cheese we're going to try today is a twist on the stag. So the stag is a 5-time American Cheese Society best of class. Took a second in its other year. We've only entered it 6 times. I don't pick contest cheese. It's the next vat going out the door to our distributors. And we really are proud of that from a standpoint of consistency of what we're trying to do, because hopefully we're getting everything right, including the affinage, and we're aging it and selecting which age sector it fits into. But then I wanted to start playing around with some marinated cheeses. And I happen to like chartreuse a lot, and have for a long time. I just think the story behind it's very cool. 1703, really only 2 monks out of a group know the recipe. They're kind of sure halfway where the recipe came from, but they don't really know where the core recipe came from. But it's basically water, sugar, and 140 herbs distilled. And so we took this, and actually we partnered with LeClaire on this, and it went back when Katie was looking for stuff to do. Now they've got plenty to do, but I said, hey, do you want to do this? I want to do this cool marination of this cheese, and I want to put it in chartreuse. And she's like, oh yeah, let's do it. So we worked with her and really developed kind of the system that now David and his team do for us now. So basically we take stag, fully cured 2.5 years, and we strip the bandage and the wax off the cheese and we pierce it. And we do it, there's a magical number, and David can chime in if he wants to on it, but it's, we pierce it and then we give it a bath in green chartreuse. And then we actually pull it out and we out of the bath and we dry it in the Avalon room, which I think puts a little bit of cool fage on it that adds a little bit to it. You can, when you open this, you can almost get a little of that cellar note that's in there when you, because if you've ever had the opportunity to go in and smell that cellar note at LeClaire, you may pick it up. I can pick it up when I open it just because I've been in there enough. But so with this cheese, we basically have the butterscotch and toffee note of the stag, but then we're adding this subtleness. And I don't like overpowering cheeses. I like things to be a very hint of. So on here, you're going to get the essences of almost, there's a little bit subtle licorice note to it. You're going to get that undertones of the liqueur. It's going to be very subtle. When we originally made it, we can't replicate. I wish we could. Maybe David and I will work on that a little bit. The first round that we ever did, we actually got the curd line to strike green right along the edge of the curd. I don't know how it worked. Katie and I tried to replicate it, and we haven't seen it in a long time. If I ever get one, I'm going to bring it over to David and say, all right, what do we do with this particular vat? But on the flavor note side, I think that the complexity is there. The liqueur adds a warmth to it. It absolutely beats the terrazine crystals down to almost nothing. You might find 1 or 2 in here, but it really takes it and really demineralizes them, which is unique to me because it's actually kind of working again with the culture when it gets down in there. Because stag will have a good amount of terrazine crystals, so that part's kind of interesting to me. But it also softens the body of the cheese a little bit, brings a little bit of remoisture, because as that moisture wicks away between the bandage and the wax, we'll lose about 2% moisture in that time period. So this cheese is looking for moisture, and we just happen to give it alcohol, which who doesn't like? I mean, I like that. So it makes it kind of fun. Pairings with this, I really like orange essence chocolate is one thing, or I'll do a sea salt chocolate. I like cognac with it. I really like mandarins or cuties, especially in the winter months. I think it's a cool winter cheese. The label on it is, my daughter does all my labels for me. So we put it in this chartreuse foil, so it's pretty striking. It's a great holiday kind of color. I mean, whether it's Christmas or Easter, obviously. But the foil actually protects the cheese a little bit because we're adding all that sugar. Although chartreuse is notoriously high in alcohol, which is a good thing, but it further protects the cheese over and above the vacuum. And I like it. I think it looks kind of cool. And I think that that's part of, you eat with your eyes too. So, what's inside's got to be excellent. It's also really good. I've done it on flatbreads with just garlic and olive oil down and shallots, which is really nice. And then spring greens on top, pull a cork. I like Rhone Reds with it. Beers with it. Blue Moon with the orange. I know it sounds, it's kind of a simple beer, probably a little over commercial, but that orange somehow works really great. This cheese will bring out allspice and nutmeg to that beer like you didn't know it was in there. And I don't know why that dynamic works with the chartreuse addition to it, because you don't get that when you just try it with stag. So it's really kind of a cool piece to play around with. But I didn't think it was a great culinary cheese, and I tried to make some stuff, and then I had some chefs who were like, oh no, we use it on different things. I'd seen it baked into a tart crust, which was kind of cool. And the stag really works well with heat. So when that comes off, and then the addition of the chartreuse is in there, it's kind of an expensive cheese addition. But I just see somebody trying to barrel aged cider is really, I have 2 bottles at home. I'm going to try it. And I have another one from Olympia Valley. So it's fun. I like being a little bit weird with them. And it's fun to work with my daughter, who does a lot of the drawing on it and on all the labels, and has done those since she's 14. She did the fawn when she was 14. So it's been nice to work with her. And this one, we got to drink a chartreuse. We did a last word cocktail together because she was 21. So she kind of she got the idea of chartreuse. And so she made the rabbit look a little bit turnt, which is okay. I know Molly hates chartreuse. So,
I have to say, as a bona fide chartreuse connoisseur, I
yeah.
really love this cheese. So thank you, Chris, so much. This cheese is delicious. I'm really excited we got to taste this. We are going to move into some Q&A next. So we have a couple questions from the audience. Folks, if you have any other questions, feel free to ask them. We'll be responding to those as they come in. I do have a couple questions for the panel to get us started. So I'm going to pass it back to Paula and Terry right now. So I know that you guys have a new farmer in your family of farms that you're excited about. Can you tell me a little bit about your new patron farmer and about what a patron farmer is?
Terry, do you want to take that one or shall I?
Well, let's take it together. You chime in on my gaps.
Well, you can start with the patron farmer. Explain that.
So we have right now 7 farms that produce the milk for our company. We're licensed as a dairy company, even though we're not the cheesemakers ourselves. Being licensed as a dairy plant allows us to pay our farms like we want to pay them. And so the farms that produce Red Barn milk are our patrons. Our newest, youngest farm is operated by Olivia Hennis. And Olivia is a graduate of UW-Platteville, I want to say 2 years ago. Worked for an older farmer in our area. His name was Bob Schlim. While she was going through high school and college, and loved farming, and made a rather courageous decision to operate her own dairy farm. Bob Schlim is a great mentor, but she is owning her herd of cows, and she grazes them, and she is one of our 7 patron farms right now.
So Olivia is unique in that she's a first generation farmer. Typically farmers are, the farm was handed down from somebody else, but she's actually a first generation farmer, 28 years old, she milks 40 pasture raised cows. So we're excited. That's part of, the mission and the model of Red Barn is to make it possible not only for family farms to be passed to the next generation, but also to make it possible for young farmers to enter the dairy industry as well.
And certainly the opportunity for her to sell her milk to Red Barn was a significant reason, of part of why she chose to indeed start farming.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a story you don't hear very often, is new, young, millennial female farmers joining the industry. So that's a little bit of hope for sure there. That's very cool. Thanks, guys. So we have a couple questions in the queue for David.
All right.
So David, the first question is what exactly is a New Zealand cheddar? And I'm excited to hear the answer to this because I don't really know it either. And then the second question was how long is the cave aged Shandoka aged? And I would add versus how long is the block aged?
Sure. Okay, so New Zealand style cheddar it differentiates primarily in the cheddaring process. In a normal cheddar, you would cut things in the mat of curd into thin-ish slabs of cheddar, and you would stack the curd one on top of the other to press down upon them. When you're doing a New Zealand style of cheddar, you take the curd bed, you rake it into segments along the vat, and you slice it into longish looking loaves. They're never stacked one on top of the other. Instead, they are rotated 90 degrees down the length of the vat as they press the whey out under their own weight. As a result, you get a more moist curd. So it's got a lot more moisture in it than a traditional English style cheddar would, because you're not pressing it all that way out. So we get about, I'd say 3 or 4% more moisture out of the vat on our New Zealand style cheddars than you would get out of a traditional English style cheddar, which kind of makes all the difference in the world when you start aging something out, especially for like the cave age. We keep it at a pretty high humidity so that we can keep a lot of that moisture in the cheese, because I like the texture and the way that it drives that mouthfeel, that big kind of buttery on the palate thing. English style cheddars tend to be more crumbly and dry. And that's really kind of all down to the cheddaring technique. And the recipe itself, other than that, is pretty close to the same. Obviously, our cultures are going to be a little bit different as well, but that's more of a you know, pick and mix kind of deal than a stylistic thing. And as far as the cave age goes, the one that I sent you guys today is just a little bit over 12 months. I think this one's about 18. We tend to sell them starting around 10 months. I try to get them done and out the door before 20, because they tend to kind of develop some off flavors that I'm not super happy with after 20. There are batches that I've had that have gone out to 22, but really we're grading and selling to a flavor profile rather than a specific age. I've never had it kind of hit profile before 6 months, and I've never really kind of had it in profile past around 22. But that window there, there's a pretty big difference from batch to batch and bat to bat, depending on season, depending on you know, the space in the cave where they spent most of their time, because every little section of that room has a different sort of like microclimate that it has to deal with. And while we move them around, they do tend to live most of their life in one section of the cave or another. So we're really kind of focused on 10 months to 18 is sort of like our big window. And we try to make sure that we're keeping the flavor profile kind of consistent as it goes out the door, rather than just stamping a date on it and calling it, that's it, it goes out the door, whether ready or not. So that we're always making sure that that's kind of our focus on that.
Sounds like you guys put a huge emphasis on quality in your operation, which I appreciate.
Yep.
So while I have you, I'd love to know if you guys have any new cool cheeses in your lineup or in the pipeline.
Sure. Obviously, for the LeClaire side, we're working a lot on Chef these days. We have been really kind of like getting our entire Chef production kind of up and off the ground over the last couple of years. And a lot of that is just sort of figuring out what we want to do with Chef. Because if you've ever been into a grocery store in America, there's a lot of Chef in the world. So finding like where you exist in that space and kind of what cheeses work is a big deal. So a lot of that is like figuring out, you know, the right flavor profile for our standard basic run-of-the-mill original Chef, but also what kind of flavors that we want to introduce to it to kind of like create a line for it. So we spend quite a lot of time on the flavor development on that. And then on the Saxon side, we're actually right now kind of retooling and reworking our Asiago Fresca. The problem we've been having with it, of course, is that the flavor profile we want is taking a lot longer to get to than a Fresca implies. So whereas a cheese that should be sold ideally in less than 6 months, it's taking us 10 to 12 months to get the flavor profile right. And as a result, we get the right flavor, but the wrong texture. So we're right now working with CDR, Center for Dairy Research, to kind of rebuild that recipe and start to rethink how we approach it. We stripped it back down to milk and culture and just started from ground up to rework and figure out how we're going to make that cheese both texturally and flavor-wise hit the mark under that 6 month mark. So like the test batches are all, we have 4 different cultures and 4 different make styles. And they're all at 3 months now. I just tasted them, and they're coming along really good. There's some culture changes that I think are going to make some real big differences. So looking forward to that. That's been a fun process thus far.
Awesome. So CDR is such an amazing resource here in Wisconsin. So for those of you guys tuning in who may not be familiar with the Center for Dairy Research, sort of like the epicenter of dairy research, in the center of it, here in Wisconsin. It's housed at the UW-Madison, also the epicenter of coronavirus in Wisconsin right now, unfortunately. But they do some really incredible work there, developing recipes, developing new cheeses, doing research on, you know, everything from packaging to shelf life to, you know, best retail practices. And they also host a series of short courses, both for lay people like myself, I have taken one, but also for cheesemakers and professionals and graders to continue to build their repertoire of expertise and just sort of focus on this environment of constant improvement here in our great state of cheese in Wisconsin. So with that, I've got a couple questions in the queue for Chris. So this is my favorite one. Chris, what do you do with the leftover Moon Rabbit bathwater? Do you have like a whey and charcuterie cocktail you're working on at home, or what do you do?
No, there isn't any because of the way that we do it. We actually vac it in. So each wheel is taken, we add the chartreuse and then we back it, and the cheese completely sucks up pretty much every drop aside from a little bit of smear on the surface, which is why we dry it for the most part. It varies from vat to vat because you get different moisture levels within there, and you can move 0.5%, and I would imagine there's probably a little bit left from time to time. But the majority of it, it generally gets in there pretty good.
Yeah, we soak them with 4 ounces a wheel, and it's, I'd say, maybe a 1/2 ounce left on the outside of that wheel when it dries out. So the rest of it's in the wheel.
It's looking for water at that time. So it's you know, it finds something liquid and it sucks it in.
I'm usually looking for water after a night of chartreuse drinking as well.
Yeah, I hear you.
I can appreciate that. All right, Chris, we've got another question for you. What was your inspiration for the Blue Jay?
Not mine. That was actually 100% my wife. I just had to figure out how to make it work. So we do little around we have like a big butcher block in the middle of our kitchen, and we sit there and we think about things that we want to do, and what we might be having wine at the time or whatever. And we were kind of, my wife really likes big buttery blue cheeses, and she's not one, she doesn't like, you know, sometimes you get like a Danish blue, it's a little bit more, you know, you get a little more piquantness to it, or really likes things that are super buttery and creamy. So we took a couple different things and combined them into a blue. But so many people are doing so many amazing blue. I mean, that's the thing with like ACS or anything we do in the state of Wisconsin or outside. There's so many amazing cheeses being made that, you know, you kind of look for complementary things to do. And she really likes to toss juniper in like roasted meats and different things that she's using doing in cooking. And so when we were tasting these cheeses, she's like, I got an idea. So we played around with a couple different herb combinations and different spices. But when we put the juniper into this kind of concoction that we had made by putting a few different cheeses together, it just really worked well. It brought the sense into it. And we got a big red cedar tree in our backyard, and the blue jays are always in there, and they're usually eating the juniper berries a lot of times in the spring, probably because they're a little fermented, so they might be getting a little zinged up on it. And so we just kind of put this combination in. So then, yeah, we work with Sid Cook on that. Sid and I have been friends a really long time. So when I went and took it to Sid makes like 108 different cheeses, and he's, I think, won more awards than almost anybody. And it's great to have really great friends like that. So he's looking at it and he said, "This is Julie's idea?" I said, "Yeah." And he's tasting, he's smelling the juniper, and he's kind of going through the cheese that we kind of concocted, and he goes, "Man, how the heck did I miss this one?" And you know, that's a good compliment for a master cheesemaker. So it is all my wife's idea. And then Sid and I just had to make it work. And that took a little bit of time. So we always got stuff in the hopper.
Well, I'm glad you guys worked on that one because it is delicious. I think that is like my most insanely like addictive cheese in my life right now. Like where once it's open, it's just like, well, that was a lot of cheese to eat in one sitting.
Gin and tonics.
What can you do?
Really?
Yeah.
Good to know.
Like a mocktail pairing with it because you don't even really need the gin. So on my drive, do like a cucumber cocktail syrup and like a little tonic water with some lime. It's really delicious.
It's great too if you do, especially, you know, I mean, you know, I know we're probably doing smaller gatherings this year, but you can do it on a tenderloin. Grill it. I like to do a little garlic, a little peppercorn on there, and then grill it, pull it off, tent it, let it rest a little bit, and then kind of pre-slice it on the platter you're going to serve it on, and then just kind of put the Blue Jay, crumble it on top of there, and let that get down in there and create that au jus. Slice a baguette, and you know, pull a cork on a bottle of red, and it's nice for entertaining during the holidays, especially. You know, make little sandwiches, and you know, it's tough. I don't like grilling, you know, a lot during the holidays because I like to party too. So.
Makes it easy. Awesome, you guys. Well, here we are at the end of our hour. I think we should maybe hop back through the panel one time in case anybody has closing remarks, anything final you'd like to impart to our attendees today. I'll kick it off. I'll just say thank you guys so much again for joining in. I hope you enjoyed your tour through Wisconsin cheese here today, and that you enjoy the rest of the samples that we sent you guys. So thanks so much. And I'll pass it back to, we'll go in the same round robin we've been in. So Paul and Terry, take it away.
Just want to say thanks again for the opportunity to meet virtually with all of you. We'd love to hear from you. Follow us on social media, send us an email. We'd love to connect with you more.
Long live the family farm.
I would say just it was great seeing everybody's virtual faces here today. I saw some names on the list that I normally see at ACS, and I'm sad that we didn't get to do that this year, but I'm looking forward to connecting with you all again soon. The next time you're in Wisconsin, please come by LeClaire Family Creamery. We'd love to see you and talk cheese anytime, any day. So thanks so much, guys, for being here, and hope you enjoyed the cheeses.
Oh yeah, and I will second that. If you guys do come to Wisconsin, visiting LeClaire is a must-do activity. They have a beautiful facility with a retail store and a restaurant and goats, so definitely don't miss it.
Thanks so much for your time, and it's really, you know, I think as we go through kind of this very unique time period and looking at it, I think that, you know, cheese is a great way to share with the people that you are able to get together with, and you know, really make it fun and make it an entertaining time period. And I think that you can bridge a lot of stuff when you got some love and you got some great cheese, and you know, play around with them and have a great time, because that's, you know, the experience, I think, also of having the ability to expand your culinary skills, you know, when it's a little still, you know, harder to go out than it used to be, or less comfortable for some people. I think that, you know, some of these great cheeses, especially from the people here, a lot of cheeses in Wisconsin and throughout the country, really lend themselves well to being more than just a boarded cheese with some cool accompaniments, and really stretch that out, because it makes stuff just such a blast. And you know, it helps all the cheesemakers and all the farmers really kind of exist. So appreciate it. Thanks for your support now. We really appreciate it.
So I just want to say to Molly, thank you for putting together such a fabulous group of panelists here. From the family farm, and you're getting a lot of like long live the family farm comments. So, all the way through the caves, which I love, and then uses for cheese, which I obsess about as well. So this has been absolutely wonderful. You guys have been terrific, and we'll be sending you some more comments and information about what upcoming ones and all the rest of it, but let us know what you thought too. All right. Thank you.
Thanks. Have a great one.